Hello.
Hello.
Do you hear me already?
Ready?
Also in the back? Yeah, kinda.
They're sleeping.
That's fair enough. How is the temperature in the bus?
Warm. Good.
On the warm side?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. This is a busy cooler. Put it down a little bit. That we don't have a temperature shock when we get off the bus. My name is David. I'm the guide for group number D. There are two groups on the bus. There's also the leisurely group on the bus who does a bit of a different route. I will tell you later. Will be not too confusing. The group L is going with my colleague René, who is also somewhere sleeping in the back, I hope. Yes. And next to me, to the left of me, our bus driver Nihad, who will bring us to the old town.
Hello.
And then later back in time for lunch. Before I start, I have to do the safety announcements. So, listen carefully. The law in Austria says that if a bus has seat belts, you have to use them. I happen to know that this bus has seat belts. I didn't hear too many clicks now, so I'm assuming you already did that. I'm not coming to check. This is not Germany, but I told you, so I'm in the clear here. That's what matters. So we're now just trying to get here through the harbor area without running too many people over. Before I start, give you a bit of a general information about Vienna. Let me tell you a little bit about the Danube, because that's where we are right now. I mean, you're all coming on a cruise ship, so you have seen the Danube already, I very much assume. But it's worth noting that the Danube here in Vienna did not always look as it does now. If you're here under the bridge, look to the left, you see it. Until the 1870s, the Danube in Vienna was not that straight river. It was just an area of an area of wetlands, about 3-4 miles wide, with about 40 islands, as many river arms around it. Great breeding place for all sorts of diseases and annual floodings. So eventually they decided to straighten that out. That was done by the same company that built the Suez Canal just a year before that. And since then the river is going straight through the town. 100 years later they changed it again. If you look to the left next to the ship, what you see is not the other shore of the Danube, that tree line that you see over there. This is the so-called Danube Island. So that divides the Danube into two. On the other side of that trees, there's the other part of the Danube. But the other part of the Danube does not have a current, because it's locked off on both sides. It's a flood protection system. They only open it up if there is a flood coming. If not, it's like a big swimming pool. So especially in summer, very popular to go for a swim, because there are no ships, no current. And on the island itself, it's not allowed to build anything, because it's also flood protection, so it's like a big park. Also in summer, very popular. There are also two nudist areas on the Danube Island. For the ones of you interested in that, probably not too busy in October, but still. These nudist areas were actually used in the 1980s by Polish and Czechoslovakian anti-communist activists for meetings, because they quite rightfully assumed that the KGB does not go undercover on nudist beaches. It's very difficult to be wired in the nude, especially with 1980s technology. We are now leaving here the harbor area by turning right, and then we're going straight to the old town. A bit general information about Vienna. Vienna is the capital city of Austria, and Vienna has a population of just over 2 million people. Since a few weeks the 2 million mark was jumped over. But Vienna used to be bigger than it is now. In the 1910s, Vienna still had a population of 2.2 million people. That got down to 1.4 million in the 1980s, and only since then there's rapid growth. That has historic reasons, because until World War I, Vienna was the capital city of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, which was a lot bigger country. It had a total population of 55 million. Then after World War I, Vienna became the capital of the small Republic of Austria, And especially after World War II, Vienna was until the late 1980s more or less the last city on the world because the Iron Curtain was right next to it. This is why it got smaller and smaller, and only since Eastern Europe opened up again, Vienna became a city in the very center of Europe again, and since then the population grows by about 30 to 70,000 people every year, mostly because of migration, obviously. So, just to know who we have here, are most of you from the United States, is that correct?
Yeah.
Any subjects of the king in the bus? Yes, from where? Canada, okay. Anybody from anywhere else? So a North American affair. Okay, just to know what we can make fun of and what not. So it's always good to have that cleared out at the very beginning. Here in front of us to the left, you see the first building of note. This is the so-called Francis of Assisi Church. Here to our left, Francis of Assisi Church, also called Jubilee Church, because it was built for the 50th crown anniversary of Francis Joseph I in 1898. That is the year it was opened. It looks a lot older, but in the late 19th century the architectural style was the so-called revival style, meaning they just built buildings looking a lot older than they are. And for this church they used the so-called Romanesque style, which was the main idea of how to build a church in the early and high medieval times. This is why it looks a lot older than it actually is. It looks a little bit like a medieval castle. It's called Francis of Assisi Church, but in Vienna everybody just calls it Mexico Church. Because it's standing on Mexico Square. And Mexico Square is named after the country of Mexico because Mexico was the only country in the world that in 1938, when Nazi Germany annexed Austria, officially complained about it. The rest of the world didn't really care. Mexico cast an official complaint. This is why then after the war, in gratitude to that square was named Mexico Square. Just if you're wondering, because in Vienna the church really is just called Mexico Square, even though it's not its official name. If you look here to the right, along the street, there you see the two hills, foresty hills. If you missed it now, you'll see it on the way back or from the ship. These two mountains right on the Danube are still part of the city of Vienna, and they are officially the first two hills of the Alps. So the Alps start here at the very western end of Vienna, and they stretch all the way to the Côte d'Azur in France, near Nice. So this mountain here, right at the Danube in Vienna, Leopoldsberg, officially the first mountain of the Alps, or as the French say, their last. That of course is very much a matter of perspective. These two mountains are also the main wine region of Vienna. Vienna is very much a wine city. Good news for the wine drinkers among you. Vienna is the only major European city that has an economically relevant wine business going on. About 2,000 acres or 700 hectares or 1,500 football fields, whatever unit you prefer, of vineyards are still inside the city limits of Vienna. But it's mainly white wine that they produce. About 80% of the wine that's produced in Vienna is white wine. And also almost 80% of the wine that's produced in Vienna stays in Vienna. So it's not much exported, and we have a rather impressive wine consumption per head. Not as good as it used to be in the 19th century. The average wine consumption in Vienna was still at 1 bottle per person a day, and that is including everybody. But that was not because everybody was, but they were all heavy alcoholics. At least that was not the official reason. The problem was that until the 1860s, the drinking water in Vienna was so bad that if you didn't want to die of dysentery immediately, you had more or less two options. One was drinking your water with vinegar, and the other was drinking your water with wine. This is why most people chose the wine option. Since the 1860s, since the big cholera epidemics passed, we have 3 big water lines that bring the drinking water all the way from the high Alps to Vienna, and since then Vienna is one of the cities in the world that has the cleanest drinking water. The regulations for tap water are even higher than for bottled water here in Vienna. So you don't need to worry about any tap water. You can easily drink it anytime. So here in front of us to the left, behind this sporting hall, we are already passing the Prater. The Prater here to the left is the most famous park of Vienna, and it's not just a park, it's mainly famous for the amusement park. So usually when people talk about the Prater, they talk about the amusement park here to our left. If you look through the trees, there you see it with the giant Ferris wheel. The Prater in general is a big park, about twice the size of Central Park in New York. But most famous for the amusement park here, the giant Ferris wheel that you see here to the left is the oldest of these kind of wheels that are still in operation. Since 1897 it's doing its turns.
Is it open today?
It is open today, yes. Always a good afternoon activity. It does make very questionable sounds, but it says they say it's absolutely functioning. So. Yes, but good note, is it open today because today is Sunday, and in Austria on Sundays people don't do much. So shops are closed today. What is open is cafes, restaurants, museums, amusement parks, some souvenir stores, but the normal supermarkets and shops are closed today. This is also why we barely have any traffic, because nobody's going to work. So it's always very quiet here on Sundays in Vienna. The reasons why we still have the strict Sunday closing times is because that's basically the only thing the conservatives and socialists agree on, not working on Sundays. For very different reasons, but they agree on that, so this is why we still everything closed. There's also the saying that in Austria everything happens 30 years later. So there was that famous quote that if the world would come to an end, it's good to move to Vienna because you get at least another 20 years out of it. But we will see about that. We just to the left of us, we just passed a statue, if you noted it, a big column. This is the statue to Navy Admiral Tegetov. Austria is a landlocked country, so you might wonder what we're doing with the navy. We don't have one anymore, but during Austro-Hungarian Empire times there still was a navy. And Tegetov won the sea battle of Lissa in 1866 against the Italians by using the ancient strategy of telling his ships to ignore their cannons and just ram into the Italians, which caught them off guard, and this is how he won the battle. He lost the war though, but he got the statue out of it. So, yeah. Always need a bit of a pragmatic approach with that. We're now already reaching the Danube Canal here in front of us. To understand the Danube Canal or Danube Channel, you have to know that we have 4 Danubes in Vienna. The mainstream Danube is where your ship is docked at. On the other side of the Danube island, that would be the so-called New Danube. If you go a bit further out, you will get to the Old Danube, which is an old river arm that is not connected to the rest anymore. And here on this side you still have the Danube Channel, which before the Danube regulations was the main arm of the Danube, and is also that part of the Danube that gets closest to the old town. And in general you can say, once you cross the Danube Channel, you are in the old town of Vienna. If you look down here to the left, this is the Danube Channel, and what you also see when you look down there are a lot of graffitis. That is because here at the Danube Channel it's actually allowed to spray. So the city of Vienna opened some areas for graffiti sprayers in order to get them away from the more important buildings and monuments. So a semi-successful strategy, let's put it like this. You can actually do even graffiti courses in Vienna. So if you want to bring a skill back home, that would be an option. Also, when crossing the Danube Channel, we will get from district number 2 to district number 1. District number 1 marks the old town of Vienna, and Vienna in total is made up of 23 districts. Always when you look at the street signs, you always see a number in front of the street name that marks the district you're in at the moment. So district number 1 is the old town, then the districts 2 to 9 go around the old town, and the districts 10 to 23 go around the so-called inner districts. So in general you can say that the higher the number you see on the street signs, the further out you are, just in case you get completely lost. That's always a slight indication. If you look here to the right, you see this glass building. This is the Unica Tower. The Unica Tower is one of the very few glass office towers here near the old town. In the old town itself, that would be illegal. Here it's still okay. Was built about 20 years ago. Named Unica Tower because it's that's the insurance company that owns it. It's built in the shape of a Q because the Q is the logo, but you can only see that it's a Q if you look at it from above, which is impossible because there are no higher buildings nearby, so that's not entirely thought through. And the building is also completely made out of glass. That was done to symbolize their transparency, but it only goes until the top floor. The highest ceiling is not made out of glass, so there their transparency ends at some point. Here, left and right, if you look there, that is the Danube channel. Now, when crossing over here, we're coming on the most important street of Vienna. This is the Ringstraße or Ring Road, and this is the main boulevard of Vienna that goes all around the old town. Was built in the 1860s instead of the city walls that used to be here. They built 800 so-called palais between the 1860s and 1890s along the Ring Road. First, and one of the important ones here to our left already, this is the former Ministry of War with the statue of Field Marshal Radetzky in front of it. Here, if you look at the old Ministry of War, you see at the ground floor windows, you see all these heads with different sorts of helmets and hats. These indicate all the uniforms of the old Austro-Hungarian army. It's a very multinational army, and every nation had its own uniform. This was all here symbolized in a very idealized way, let's put it like this. Here to our left, this is both the Museum and University of the Applied Arts. This is where the likes of Gustav Klimt learned the trade. And along the Ring Road, you have to know that most buildings, the architectural style of it indicates what's going on inside. So usually all the buildings that have to do with science are built in that Italian Renaissance style that you see here to the left. The administrative or the government buildings are usually built in that classicistic style. And most of the private residences are built in that Baroque style that you see here to our right. So here along this street, after the city wall was dismantled and the street was laid out, everybody with name, money, title wanted to have a residence on this new street. So it's not just the state or the city that built, also a lot of private little palaces were built here, even though most of them were later turned into hotels. Because you know, it's very nice to have a house with about 200 rooms, but eventually you realize you don't need them all. I think that's why a lot of these families who own these buildings then later turned it into hotels. Here to our left, you have the city park of Vienna. The city park is one of the very few areas on the Ring Road that was never built on. Very popular park, especially in the summer. Good meeting point. Always see a lot of teenagers sitting around drinking beer. For that you have to know that we don't have any public drinking laws in Austria, and the legal drinking age in Vienna is 16. So don't be shocked if you see young people drinking in public. That's very much part of the culture here, so to put it nicely. If you look here to the right between these two modern buildings, you see the Palais Coburg, the Asperger's Castle as we call it. The family of Saxon-Coburg, one of the most important families during monarchy times. This is why they got their palais here, even on top of the city walls when it was built. The Palais Coburg now also is a hotel, 5-star hotel, and the last years you often saw it in the media because in the Palais Coburg is where the negotiations about a new nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran were always held. Because Vienna is the headquarters of the International Atomic Energy Agency, so everything concerning nuclear power is always negotiated in Vienna. And these kind of deals are always done here in Palais Coburg, or in here right next to us in Hotel Marriott. So in Palais Coburg is usually where the Iranians were sitting, in the Hotel Marriott, or the European and Americans delegations, because officially they are not talking to each other, so they had to go in separate hotels. So that's ganz kurz. We just have to wait this tram out, because I want you to take a look here to the left in this opening at the park. There you see the statue of Johann Strauss, that golden statue in the marble arch. And this is probably the most photographed statue in Vienna. It's here because right next to it, here to our left, you have the Kursalon, which was the preferred concert hall of Johann Strauss. And Johann Strauss, for Vienna, very important. In the second half of the 19th century, he was the superstar in the music scene. Conducted concerts all over the world, from Moscow to Boston. Was even for the 19th century standard, he was very much superstar, also in a gossip sense. Newspapers were always full of what he is up to. He was married 3 times, engaged 13 times, so a man of his word, so to say. And the biggest concert he ever played was in Boston in 1872 in front of 100,000 people, even though he was panically afraid of traveling. But they gave him 100,000 good reasons to go there. And the $100,000 in the 1870s were a lot of money. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but if you calculate 150 years of inflation in it, not too bad. Here in front of us, that white building, if you now turn left, it will be to our right. This is the Hotel Imperial, probably the most famous hotel in Vienna. It's always the hotel where the state guests reside, so whenever president, dictator, king, queen, whatever is visiting Vienna, they usually stay in Hotel Imperial. And the presidential suite in the Hotel Imperial costs about almost 7,000 euros per night, and it's breakfast not included. But you do have the very first McDonald's of Austria right next door, so that solves that. And even though breakfast is not included, what is included is a butler that irons your newspapers in the morning, so that you don't have to deal with the cold and not very flat newspaper, as the peasants have. So, now here we're already getting on Charles Square, one of the most important squares in Vienna. There are 2 important buildings here. Here to our right, that red building, this is the Musikverein, where every year the New Year's concert is being held. And if you look to the left, you have Charles Church, one of the most important Baroque buildings north of the Alps. Built under the reign of Emperor Charles VI, but obviously not named after him, because you can never name a church after a ruler. What you can do is you can find a saint of the same name and name it after that saint. This is what they very often did in Vienna, so it's not quite a coincidence that the churches have often the same name as the emperor of the time, but officially, of course, they are always named after a saint. The Musikverein here to our right, is, as I said, is where the New Year's concert is held every year, watched on average by 50 million people worldwide. And it's also the home of the Vienna Philharmonics. This is why they are playing the concert always here. Here to our left you see 2 train stations. These train stations were designed by Art Nouveau architect Otto Wagner, and they were built for the sole use of Emperor Francis Joseph I. But as it turned out, he was not much of a public transportation man. He preferred his horse carriages, so these train stations were never used. Now one of it is turned into a cafe, because this is always what we do in Vienna when we don't have a use for a building. We just make a coffee house in it. There are over 4,000 coffee houses in Vienna. But we use that term very loosely. Some just look like a bar or a nightclub even. So don't get fooled too much just because it says that it's a cafe. It doesn't mean that you actually get coffee there. See also Sunday morning, some bars are open very late, as you can see here. Here to our right, they are still on it, but it's will be soon time to go home, I assume, or church, whatever their plan is for Sunday mornings. Now we have, especially in Vienna in general, as I said, there are no real public drinking laws, and also the closing hour laws are very loose. So until 6, basically any restaurant or bar can get licensed, and on the weekends you can even be longer, as you can see here to our right. But they actually looked rather decent for the time, I have to say, considering they're probably on it for 12 hours already. Here we now turn to the right again, and then we will come back through the ring road. We just did here this slight detour to pass by Charles Square or Karlsplatz. If you look here in front of us, slightly to the left on the other side of the square, at around 11 o'clock, you see the building with that golden roof. This is the Secession. It was founded by the likes of Otto Wagner and Gustav Klimt in the late 19th century because they were very unhappy about the state of the arts. Because in the 19th century, as I mentioned at the beginning, artists were basically just copying older styles, be it in architecture, sculpture, painting, portrait. They thought the artists should be a bit more creative than that. This is why they seceded from the Artists Union and founded their own place, and this is why it's called Secession or secession, because they seceded. But as is the case with most secessionist movements, after a few years they split up themselves, but the building is still here and still used for exhibitions and events sometimes. If you look here straight ahead through town, you already see the top of St. Stephen's Cathedral. This is where our walking tour will end later on. This is true for both groups, even though Group L is going to it from the other side. We're not going straight down there, we would be there in 6 minutes or something. Still stay a bit on the bus and go then a bit longer. What you see here in front of us to the left, this is the State Opera of Austria. It's one of the most important opera buildings in the world. They're basically playing a different opera every day, which organization-wise is quite difficult. The building is also nicknamed the first building on the ring because it just is the first building that was built after the city wall was dismantled. But originally it was extremely unpopular. The building was heavily criticized. The criticism was so bad that the architect responsible committed suicide just 3 weeks after it was finished. The problem was, when they started building it, they didn't know that the train line would be going right in front of it. And the train line made it necessary for the street level to be lifted by about 2 meters or 7 feet. And this is why the ground floor level looks a bit sunken into the ground, if you look closely here. And this is also why they couldn't build a ramp. And in the 19th century, an opera house needed a ramp, because when you wanted to go to opera, you took a horse carriage, got up the ramp. On top of the ramp, you got off the carriage, looked down to the peasants on the street, and this is then when you got in. Now with this design, they had to go in on street level, which people were not happy about. Some people also said it looks like a train station, so people were not happy. But the attitude changed. Because in World War II it was heavily destroyed, mainly because it looks like a train station. But it was then rebuilt with the original plans. So there you can see that the attitudes towards it changed a lot. The only difference between now and before it was rebuilt is that nowadays you can see the stage from wherever you are, from any seat in the opera. The 19th century that was not necessarily the case. Here to our right, see another statue. This is Goethe, the famous German writer. Goethe is for the German language what Shakespeare is for the English language. So even though Goethe has nothing to do with Vienna, he was never ever here, he still has the statue in most bigger German cities. And he's always sitting, because he demanded that for his statues. He said he doesn't want to spend all eternity standing, which is a fair point. If you look here to the right, into the opening of the park, you see another statue. Here, if you look right, this is Mozart. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart lived the last 10 years of his very short life here in Vienna, and for a while he was even a court composer. Court composer means that he was the personal composer of the emperor, in his case Emperor Joseph II. And this brings us already to the next topic, because here in front of us to the right you already have the old imperial palace, the Hofburg, or the winter palace as it's sometimes called, in contrast to the summer palace in Schönbrunn. And the Hofburg here to our right was built over the course of 700 years, because every emperor kind of tried to immortalize himself by building bits and pieces to it. So it's not really one design structure, it's really a building with a lot of add-ons. Here to our left you have the twin museums of Vienna. We just passed the Museum for the Fine Arts, and opposite of it, in front of us to the left, this is the Natural History Museum, the Museum of Stones and Bones, so to say. And in between you have Maria Theresia Square with the statue of Maria Theresia in the center of it. The only female ruler we ever had ruled Austria from 1740 to 1780, all the while having 16 children. And if you think 16 children are a lot, her husband had 31, so was even busier. Two of her sons became emperor themselves, but most famous probably her youngest daughter, Maria Antonia. After she married the King of France, she was called Marie Antoinette. Marrying the King of France sounds like a good catch, but in hindsight not the best. Lost her head in the French Revolution. Talking about revolution, here you have the Austrian Parliament, a building of the Austrian Parliament, built in that ancient Greek style, because ancient Athens is a bit considered to be the cradle of European democracy. This is why they used that style for the Parliament building, looking a bit like a Greek temple. Also has the two statues in front of it with the golden helmet. Just past it. This is Pallas Athene, the ancient Greek goddess of wisdom and strategy, and in her hand she's holding another goddess, the one with the wings. This is Nike or Nike, the goddess of victory. Nothing to do with sports shoes. People in Vienna always make fun of the fact that the goddess of victory is turning her back to Parliament, which was not ideal. Here too, if you look left, you see her again with her golden helmet. If you look here to the right, look through these trees, this is the Town Hall Park, because there's the Town Hall of Vienna. Here, look through, you see the top of it. Now at that crossing, when we turn left, if you look right, there you see the Town Hall of Vienna. It's important because Vienna is not just the capital of Austria, Vienna is also its own federal state of Austria, so also has its own parliament. So here to our left, this is the Austrian parliament, and now behind us in the Town Hall, there would be the Viennese government, right next to each other. Buildings were built at the same time, but in completely different style. Especially here, this area outside of the former city wall that was standing until the 1860s. Outside the city wall there was the so-called glacis, which was an area about 400 meters wide, 1,200 feet, where it was not allowed to build anything on, to have a nice shooting range at possible attackers. And this is why, when they dismantled the wall, there was a lot of open space, and this is why you have a lot of big representative buildings here in this area. Also here to our right, the Palace of Justice, as it's called. It's the building here that's flanked with the two lions at the entrance. Also a very traditional building here in Vienna. So, before I forget, Group D, the group that's going with me, the normal walking group, we will getting off the bus now in a minute. Just go around the Natural History Museum, then we get off, start our walking tour. For the ones that are on Group L, don't panic when a lot of people leave the bus now. Group L, please stay on the bus for a bit. You're continuing the bus tour for a bit. Get off at a different spot, and then Group L is doing a much shorter walk. So if you're on Group D, we now just turn right here, then we get off the bus. We will be then on channel number 4, if you want to already set it. And Group L, please stay on the bus. My colleague René will take over. You will still go on for a few minutes, and then you go to the city center from the opposite side of the old town. We will later go back with the same bus, not from the spots that we are getting off now. We get on the bus from the other side of the old town, but it will be the same bus. There will be nobody on in between. So in case you left anything here on the bus, in case you left anything on the bus, you can just leave it here. We'll be coming back on the same bus. So Group D, I will see you outside. Also halb 12 vom Schwedenplatz fahren.
Ja, ich ziehe jetzt einmal durch. Was ist das Körbel da?
Oh, das ist Glück.
Aha.
Das ist Trinkgeld. Aber das bleibt immer drin, diese
Okay.
Backwurst.
Okay, so good morning from my side. My name is René. And just to make sure all of you want to do the short walk this morning. Okay? Good. So the doors are closed and we are leaving. I will sit down also. Okay. So we will now continue our drive along the ring road until the end, and then we will get off at the other side of the city center. And so we're gonna attack from the other side. So to say, we walk up to St. Stephen's Cathedral. It's a way shorter walk than the regular groups. Yeah, and we will also end at St. Stephen's Cathedral and then also have our free time there. If some of you decide you don't want to walk at all today, then there's an option to stay just down where we get off the bus at one of the cafes, and I will pick you up once we are heading back to the bus. If you want to opt for that option, then please let me know and I will take you to a cafe, and then I will pick you up later on when we're about to go back to the bus. Yeah, so we are leaving now the two state museums here. The Museum of Fine Arts ahead of us to the right and the Museum of Natural History to the right behind us. These are the state museums, the largest museums of Austria, and they are really big, beautiful museums, like the Museum of Fine Arts, one of the top picture galleries in the world with many of the old masters. You have Raphael, Rubens, Rembrandt, Bruegel, Titian, Veronese, and so on and so forth, and a big section for Greek and ancient Greek and Roman art. And the Museum of Natural History on the other side. This is also, we call it the Stones and Bones Museum because that's what you have there mainly. So if you're interested in stones, for example, the world's largest collection of meteorites can be found in that museum, and all kinds of animals, the extinct animals, skeletons of dinosaurs and so on. The whole collection, for example, for the Museum of Natural History is 30 million objects. They only show you 1% in that museum. That's enough to fill the house actually. And yeah, it took 20 years to complete these palaces, you could say, of science and art. And in between, we already heard, this is Maria Theresa, and she was a very important figure of the Habsburg family, the only woman who was ruling, because there was no son who could do the job, and then the father of Maria Theresa, he died suddenly. He died very unexpectedly because he ate the wrong mushrooms. So he had some kind of mushroom stew, but they were poisonous, and that was the end of Charles VI. And they tried very hard during their lifetime, Maria Theresa's parents, to produce a son, because usually the son becomes the heir, but they failed. So the doctors, they gave them all kinds of advices. For example, put erotic images in your bedroom. It didn't really help. No son was born. The next advice was, the doctors told her mother to drink a lot of red wine. This would be maybe good for the fertility regarding a son. So she drank a lot of red wine. She became an alcoholic, but no son was born. Yeah, and so Maria Theresa, at the age of 23, had to become the ruler, and she had to fight a few wars, especially against Prussia, because Prussia thought, well, this young woman, unexperienced, what can she do to defend the empire? And yeah, so they attacked, and Maria Theresa fought some wars for several years actually. In the end, she lost a few territories, but she managed to establish the Habsburg rule in Europe, to consolidate the power, even gain other territories, and in the end, she was ruling for 40 years, as we already heard. Very important figure in the history of Austria. Now we have a chance one more time to see the parliament here. Beautiful building, and it's especially beautiful because they just renovated it. They said they're gonna finish in 2021. They finished this year, 2 years later, and it cost a bit more than projected as usual. So the cost for this renovation was 430 million euros. And I'm not sure if our politicians really would deserve such a beautiful building at such a high cost. We also have not only Pallas Athena, which we've already seen, but also look at the horses and the guys, the men with the horses, the so-called horse tamers. This is also symbolic, is a message to our politicians, to the parliamentarians, that they should tame their emotions, watch their words, watch their behavior when they're inside this parliament, just like the men managed to control the horses that you see there. But as we know, it doesn't always work like this inside, so the behavior sometimes is not really nice at all. To the right side we have a historic park. This is the Rose Garden. If you look, you can see a few roses. Still the most romantic park in the city center. Hundreds of different roses are there, and some of them are still blooming. It's one of the 960 parks that we have in Vienna. And now to the right side, our Burgtheater, our national theater, the most prestigious house in the German-speaking countries. And on the left side there we have a great view now of our city hall. Very impressive building. This is for the mayor of Vienna, who is also the governor of Vienna at the same time, as Vienna is also a federal state of its own, one of the 9 federal states. Yeah, on the right side there is a cafe, the Café Landmann. This is an example for the traditional Viennese cafes. They're celebrating 150 years anniversary this year actually, so it's been here since 1873, and this cafe is one of the last of the traditional cafes that are located still on the Ring Road. And this is also the cafe where Sigmund Freud, you know him, the father, the inventor, developer of the psychoanalysis, would have his breakfast and would play chess and meet friends, and then after breakfast he would just cross the building, and you see on the left there this building. This is our main university building, and there Sigmund Freud would give his lectures actually. So we have about 200,000 students in Vienna every year. This is about 10% of the population, so Vienna is very much a city of and for students. One reason is they come from all over Europe, from all over the EU, because in Austria it is free to study. We don't have fees. If you stay in the minimum study time, then you don't have to pay a fee. If you take longer, because you're a bit slow, then you pay a fee. It's 365 euros per semester. This is also not too much. So basically free universities here, and that attracts a lot of people from other EU countries. On the left we have the second biggest church of Vienna. This is Votive Church. The towers are 99 meters high, and this was initiated by the brother of the Emperor Francis Joseph. His name was Maximilian, and the occasion was that Francis Joseph actually was attacked in his early days when he became the emperor. He was attacked by Hungarian nationalists, and in the last minute he was rescued by somebody who just came by and who could rescue the emperor. And then Maximilian, the brother, was so grateful, he wanted to build a church to thank God that the emperor was saved, wasn't killed in that attack. So he started what we would call today a fundraising campaign, collecting donations to build the church, and it took quite some time actually till he had it all together and they could start to build this church. And Maximilian, by the way, he had an interesting career later on as the younger brother. He knew he couldn't become the emperor here in Austria, but he was kind of ambitious, as was his wife as well. And so they accepted the offer to become the empress of Mexico. And they were somehow talked into that adventure. They told them, well, go to Mexico, the people are waiting for you, they need an emperor there, but in fact this was not really the case. So he arrived there and he didn't have too much support in Mexico. Imagine somebody coming from far away, not speaking the language, completely different culture, and apart from that, the Mexicans, most of them wanted to be a republic, not a monarchy. So after some time actually, it was a sad end of Maximilian's career as an emperor of Mexico. They shot him there, the Republicans shot him, and he came home to Vienna in a coffin, on a ship. On the left, this is a former barracks of the Austro-Hungarian army, quite impressive fortress-like building, a bit intimidating. They built a few barracks around the city center just in case there is an attack from outside, but also in case there is a rebellion, a revolution from the people, then they would have the soldiers already ready in the city center to fight this revolution. That's also the reason why the ring road, as you see, is not like a ring, it's more like a straight road, then you got a curve, then it's straight again for a few hundred meters and so on. That was the wish of the military, because they feared another revolution, civil war might break out, and so they asked to have that design of the ring road, because if the people rise and take to the streets, if they rise and they walk on a straight road, then it's so much easier to shoot them actually, instead of having just a ring-shaped road where you have more chances to hide. Now we are already at the end of this ring road. We are riding now along the Francis Joseph Quay, that's the name of that street, next to the Danube Canal. Again, you have a great view here of the graffiti down there, some urban gardening, plenty of restaurants, plenty of nightlife there in summer. And in a bit we will already get off the bus. There is one thing I want to show you before we get off the bus. This will be the oldest church of Vienna. After the next traffic light, look to the right. This is called St. Ruprecht's Church. It goes back to the year 900. It's a smaller church, but they still use it also for concerts. It's very nice atmosphere in there. And it is named after Saint Ruprecht, who was also the patron of the salt, and the salt trade was very important for Vienna in the Middle Ages. The ships would sail right here on the Danube Canal and would dock here right at the city center and do their trades. So now behind this petrol station, there you can see this old church, Saint Ruprecht's. And then after the next traffic light, we will get off the bus. I am on channel number 3, by the way, so I will see you outside, and then we start our walk to St. Stephen's. Any questions for the moment? Okay, if something comes up, we can talk outside. Ich danke dir.
Halb 12.
Um 11:30.
Warte, ich mal geschrieben. Steht nicht so, das ist
Bis wir sehen, wenn du vorhin stehst. Kannst du da stehen bleiben?
Ja, ja, aber das ist
okay,
okay.
also
Ja.
super, weil wir gehen da durch. Passt, danke.
is up after.
Right here.
Right here? So if you didn't want to walk, you want to sit over there?
I will take you. Do you want to go to a cafe? Or
It
you want to
doesn't
stay
matter to me.
I could bring you to the corner.
Hold on to something.
Well, wait a minute, your jackets. Wait a minute, you gotta back up a little.
So, our departure.
There.
Keep